Hello, everybody. It's Lenny Murphy of Greenbook here with another one of our interview series. And today it is my great honor and pleasure to be talking to my good friend Lev Mazin, CEO of AYTM. Hey, Lev, how are you?
Hi, Lenny. Doing great. The honor is all mine. Thank you.
No. Well, it's a mutual appreciation society. Um, so for those who don't know, AYTM is a marketing research automation platform with built-in panel. I've said before for years that I think that AYTM is one of the best kept secrets in the industry, and I continue to think that. Um, uh, Kind of bridging the gap between DIY and automation platforms and customization and full service, and you've just packaged all the needs up for the industry in a really spectacular platform. But you can probably describe it better than I can. So why don't you just give everybody your sense of AYTM before we dive into the rest of the conversation?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we started it in 2009 from outside of the industry with a simple feeling that the time has come to give the opinions of consumers around the world into the hands of people other than researchers. And what was missing in the industry was an affordable do-it-yourself way to program the survey and send it using your credit card in the middle of the night without talking to anyone to send to the target audience, to the subset of the population that are mostly relevant to the questions that anyone wants to ask. And that's what we did. We had to do the difficult way because there were no APIs available for contacting an existing panel. And the survey platforms that existed didn't have anything integrated. And the common thing that we heard when we asked the industry people was that no, it's not possible, not going to happen. We tried, we failed, we closed it up to be an internal resource. But somehow some magic happened, and we were able to produce two miracles: our own viable consumer panel integrated directly into our own survey platform. And since then, they continued working in tandem, serving our clients with a variety of research topics. And the support layer that we added later on just makes our clients feel that they're taken care of.
So since then, fast forward a few years, and you've developed an approach on research automation that I think is pretty unique in the industry compared to where some of the other platforms have gone. So tell us a bit more how you came to develop that. What kind of led you down this unique niche that you fulfill today versus other folks?
Absolutely. We're pretty good at developing applications, but we're also pretty good at listening to our clients. And our clients were looking at us and saying, that's fantastic. That's what we were waiting for. And if only you can do X, if only something that we have heard of or experienced in the past would be possible to do in the do-it-yourself environment. And we continued making our platform more savvy and capable. And we added, we thought about those upgrades as things that can empower our users without making the platform heavier or less intuitive. That was always the balance. And that led us to cracking on such heavy and complex research tests as conjoint, choice-based conjoint, and max-diff, and perceptual mapping. And those were the things that our clients were not even suggesting because they thought that it's, since in their experience, it takes several weeks and several very, very smart statisticians and researchers to pull off. They just mentioned as something that would be fantastic, but probably out of reach. But it turned out that when you think about those tests from the usability first perspective, and when you think about respondents' experience and researchers' experience in the same equation, it happens that it's not only possible, but very lends itself to a very beautiful and elegant implementation. So we ended up with having a platform that is keeps the researcher in the driver's seat, allows them to rely on the templates, but assemble precisely the survey and combination of questions and survey flow that satisfy their research needs. But they can choose and drag and drop all sorts of advanced research experiments that we automate fully for them, from programming to the analysis. And that's, I think, a differentiator, because another approach to automation is when you don't have that flexibility, you produce applications that are very good at one specific task, right? In my mind, they're also awesome, and they gain popularity. And using a combination of those applications, you can get quite further on in your objectives. But they're more like elevators, right? They automate you getting from one floor to another on a very, very predictable, very reliable path, right? And our automation is more like a vehicle, where that you can drive and you can take places, and it has some auto-driving capabilities. It can park itself into a nice choice-based conjoint environment. But you ultimately decide how it feels and where you go and who's with you and all that jazz.
So you were the Tesla of market research platforms.
You know what? In the beginning, we were thinking about ourselves as Toyota. I think today it's fair to say that we're closer to Tesla.
There are worse things to be. So I can just see the next AYTM marketing campaign, Starman, and anyway.
Yeah, or Mars rover.
We digress, but we could have fun with this conversation. So one thing that's always impressed me about AYTM is, and you mentioned it, kind of the elegant design. And you come from a design background, so your approach in developing the platform, particularly from the respondent experience, is very different than most. And you've put that kind of front and center in your own UX. So that would indicate that you think the respondent experience is the platform partner's responsibility. But is it? We're in this dynamic. Whose responsibility is to ensure a good respondent experience? You're giving them the tools, but are they using them correctly to do that?
Mm-hmm. I think it's a very painful question for our industry, and it has been for a long time.
Yeah.
And the biggest source of that tension and friction is the fact that different companies play typically one role in the equation. Panels are operated as panels with their business objectives. They cannot turn business down just because the survey is a little bit longer than what their respondents want to. Corporate researchers want long surveys because they don't want to approve another budget if they forgot to include some important questions, or if they want to make sure that the survey is providing continuity with prior waves. And platforms have to be, or so they think, so accepting of any survey structure and any survey design that they allow ultimate customization, right? That is giving the researchers the full creative license to do good things, but also do bad things under the economical pressure of this model. We are immune to many of those problems because by design, any decision we take takes an immediate and very painful result in other part of our company, and that helps us to balance things, right? We have built certain guidelines on the platform that make it very visible for researchers when what they ask or what they try to do in the survey structure will result in bad respondent experience. And I think that part of the problem is just it's not very visible when researchers are working on survey in Microsoft Word and email chain, and they kind of have a feeling what it will look like in the end product, but they don't have an experience handy. In our environment, and the idea that we think is very powerful is such that you're designing the survey, and every time on every iteration, you have an ability to turn on the preview and experience it and see, would I be comfortable sending it to my boss and expecting them to finish and give thoughtful answers, or am I asking for too much? I believe that this is a fundamentally important thing for our industry, where we see respondents getting discouraged. We see respondents' quality of answers across the industry going down. And we don't see it now in our interface, in our ecosystem. And I believe that this is because, as a platform, we took the responsibility for guiding researchers into something that will not break the mobile experience, something that will provide respondents with such a wonderful way of expressing their opinion that they're much more likely to be thoughtful and provide great data, and in its turn benefit our clients.
So at times, so full disclosure, those who don't know, we utilize AYTM for grit, and it's always fun. I say with gritted teeth, literally, as we're designing the next iteration of grit, which I'm right in the middle of right this second. And there's often pushback from very experienced, very knowledgeable, trusted researchers, both as participants and as part of the grit family, in thinking through the design and some of the design choices that we make because they fit within the AYTM platform. So now, personally, I think that you guys have the approach that you've taken is the right approach. I think that focus on the respondent experience overall is the right thing. But I know from firsthand experience now for several years that some researchers really don't like it. So there's a pushback. There's a sense of, but wait, I want this type of flexibility. So how do you factor that into your approach? How do you get to that point of telling the researchers, you know what, I hear you, I understand this is the way things were for the last 50 years, but this is a different world. And
Sure.
yeah, so how do you strike that balance? Because I don't know. I'd like to know how to do it too.
So what I really love about grit is, for a change, we become we play both roles. We're designing the survey and we're taking the survey next week, right? So we got to suffer through the results of our decisions firsthand, and benefit from the results that we receive from it, right? And it's like any other personal decision. Do I eat that dessert or not? What I think we need to realize is that right before and right after we take any survey, most of us will check their LinkedIn's and Facebooks and watch something on online and read a blog post. And survey in that respect becomes just another piece of content that we interact with that is typically much more demanding than your typical wall on Facebook timeline,
Right.
where it only asks you to like what you like and maybe occasionally comment on what you don't like, or
take a quiz.
Someone,
whatever.
yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So from that perspective, survey cannot survive the way it was 10, 15, 20 years ago, when it was a clipboard with a lot of pages, and you would be a captive audience, and so with a pen, and until you finish, you're kind of committed to that thing. You will be distracted. Your brain will try to process those questions, and that questionnaire is just another interactive piece of content. And you cannot be that far away from what our brains are now wired to do in the modern social media age and other media consumption. We tend to, the computer internet is training our brains to have lower time span on attention span on interacting with content. And it just becomes super difficult for people who don't have as internal motivation as we have designing grit we're asking them about someone else business decisions and problems. Best surveys that allow for more flexibility from respondents are something that they really passionate about, either positively or negatively. They give you a little bit more slack, and they can go on for 10-15 minutes. But regular surveys should not cross the line of about 7 minutes these days, especially when taken on mobile devices. That's just the reality of our data ecosystem. And the way we guide our clients in the survey editor is by showing them that with color changes and some little warnings and bells that saying that this field just has too much text in it, or you can add another 2 answer choices, but then you shouldn't push it much further. So first, it's kind of rubber guidelines and limits. Then they become more rigid as you're pushing the limit of what, in our experience, we think is reasonable and humane to put in front of a respondent.
Humane. So you're the Tesla and the ASPCA of the research space. Okay, we got it. So, kind of all of that said, and that's a great answer, and thank you. When we think about where you started, it was more kind of a DIY platform, right, with the integration and all that. Then you morphed into DIY with automation and with a service component. But as we look at the trajectory of the industry, at least the way that I see it, the DIY and automation and AI and they're kind of interchangeable terms now, are rapidly transforming the industry, or becoming much more mainstream. They're not niche any longer. What does that look like for AYTM, and what do you think that looks like for the industry as that trend continues?
Absolutely. Going back to the analogy with elevators, do you remember that we had people operating elevators?
Yeah, the bellman. Yeah,
the bellman.
Yeah.
And that was a separate job, and that was super necessary for anyone to enter an elevator, that there will be an operator.
Yeah.
And I think that what we see is that we don't need those people anymore in elevators. And that becomes scary for researchers because they hear the word automation and they feel that they're obsolete and their job is at jeopardy.
Sure.
Right? But I believe that for a long time, still, we will need people in the driver's seat because the automation in that application will just give them more time and more resources and more money, more budgets for higher level problems.
Yep.
I believe full-heartedly in improving the experience of researchers by empowering them with tools and technology that takes the boring and repetitive tasks that can be automated out of their daily routine. I'm not quite ready for self-driving transportation everywhere. I love driving my car. But I can do parallel parking quite well. But if there is a button on my car that can drive parallel park itself, I would be grateful for it, because in that case, I can just sit and relax and check my messages or do something else. For our business, I believe that researchers are enjoying the fact that they become more in control, that they don't have to wait on other people to do something that the platform can do for them much more efficiently, much faster, and at the same quality.
Oh.
And that empowers them to do something that they always wanted, but never had the chance to really focus on. And this is something that is not possible to automate and probably will not be possible to automate in the next decade. This is really applying human creativity and knowledge and overall strategic thinking about what business, what does it mean for the business? What questions should I ask, and what's happening? A lot of that, we feel that it can translate from the big data and big data analysis, but really, I think the artificial intelligence is way less sophisticated than what we tend to think or hope at this level. It will still, it will definitely continue improving. But on this juncture, I think that this approach and this philosophy in automating market research is going to be growing and going to be making a lot of people more successful and more important in their jobs.
Yeah, I agree, and it's a message that most people, well, the folks that I hang out with, at least tend to echo. Even in IX Europe 2 weeks ago, there was kind of a back-to-back presentation, one from Stan from Unilever around AI, and that was his message that this is going to empower us, to free us to do more things, to free us from being technicians. And rather to be more strategists, to focus on the business. And then Steve Phillips from Zappi, which of course they're certainly talking about automation a lot as well. Turned the term on its head, was talking about intelligence augmentation versus artificial intelligence. And I thought that was a nice way to think about it. That that's where ultimately where we're going, is that idea around utilizing these platforms like AYTM to free us from the drudgery, if you will. And allow us to augment our intelligence, to focus on the big picture, to do all of those things. So now off my soapbox. So as you follow through on that just for a minute, and then we'll kind of wrap up. Where do you see that trend, that shift of look, it's not about the robots taking over. We're becoming cyborgs. We're integrating more things so that we can be better. And do better. What does that look like in the research industry, and what do you think that looks like for AYTM over the course of the next 5 years? Just think about
it. I'm not a futurist, or I don't know. I don't have the crystal ball to say what will happen next. But I think that there is a lot of energy and a lot of appeal and a lot of magic, to be frank, in taking something really complex and make it very easy. And what I see is that people tend to have very various understanding of techniques like choice-based conjoint, even in our industry, but definitely in the neighboring industries. Very few people know what the heck it is.
Right.
But when you stop and spend 3 to 5 minutes explaining what it does, all of a sudden, many more people find it useful and applicable and very, very cool for what they're doing.
Right. Oh, it's an A/B test on steroids. Oh, okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It can just take a package and create one that will have more chances to succeed among a multitude of other combinations.
Right.
So I think that the trick is in explaining people what automation is doing, how it's done. I think for us it's incredibly important to stay transparent about what's inside our solutions, right? It's not easy to produce that tech. It requires very deep understanding of what's inside and how it's functioning, and how to think deeply about every minute decision on how to visualize the data and how to present it to respondents. And we want our clients who care and who know where to look to understand what's inside and how exactly it's set up and what are the defaults and why we chose them. But for those who don't care, we want to make sure that everything we produce requires the least amount of cognitive toll on them to use. Just drag and drop, share what you know about your existing dilemma or product, and then receive the data in a way that you can show to a friend of yours, to a neighbor, and they will have very easy time understanding what transpires in it.
Yeah.
So that's I believe what will continue driving AYTM and other research automation techniques. I believe that this is the path that will be prevalent for the next in the next foreseeable future.
No, I agree. And you certainly helped pioneer that. So I think it truly pioneered it before anybody else. Um, and I think have that wonderful balance between the rigidity of automation. That's one of the trade-offs, and the flexibility of full service research and creativity,
Yeah.
which is certainly an impressive characteristic that I think's been hard for a lot of folks to grasp.
hmm United with a deeply rooted sense of empathy to all involved players.
Yeah, see, now, empathy is not a topic that comes up very often when you're talking to technology providers. So I think maybe it's that San Francisco vibe that you have. So you showed me out the window earlier. It's a beautiful day, and so I can understand empathy kind of permeating you. If we're talking to somebody in New York right now, I don't think they would be utilizing that language. So that's another unique aspect of AYTM. We have talked longer than we probably should have, and I know you and I can talk forever about this stuff. Any last thing that you'd want to say to the audience around how important it is to uh, focus on the respondent experience, and kind of give that last push that this really is something that needs to be an area of intense prioritization within the research space?
I realize that our business structure and our decisions are quite unique and not going to help many of the companies who specialize on one segment in the industry. But we have to talk and we have to solve this problem together. And every company that is engaged in this ecosystem needs to put it on the list of their priorities to understand what their decisions are leading to. Because just like with environment, it will bite us sooner or later, and we're already feeling the differences. We have to be respectful to respondents who are taking the survey. This sense of respect, it should be exercised on many levels, from keeping our promises in terms of the incentives that we offered them, to structuring the surveys in a way that would resonate with them and would be engaging, and to definitely to the length of the interview. I think that people are getting better at understanding it. Researchers are. I think the challenge is to convince the larger set of people, the decision makers, the C-level execs, and the ultimate buyers of research, and evangelize this idea that it's super important and that they cannot expect thoughtful, high-quality answers without putting themselves in the shoes of respondents and treating them as they would want to be treated.
Right, with empathy. Yes. Lev, it is always a pleasure. Thank you so much. We will chat again, and appreciate all of your time and wonderful insight.
Thank you very much, Lenny.
All right.